Hey class, this is video 3, part 2. So we left off with a discussion of folkways, mores, and taboos. And then norms and values. And so we start with values. Values are what an individual or what society thinks is important. And then norms are the actions that are based on that. So a real quick review. We like personal space. In America, our ideal of personal space is, it varies from individual to individual. It's about 18 and 24 inches or so. So that's one of our basic values, is we like personal space. A norm is that, like, if you get on an elevator and somebody stands too close to you, you get uncomfortable. If they get too close to you and you feel comfortable enough, you might say something like, what's wrong with you? Or, would you move away from me a little bit? Or something like that. But the value is that we like a little bit of personal space. We like mobility, freedom, and the norm that would go with that is we don't want somebody standing too close to us when we talk to them. We don't want somebody we just meet to touch us. It makes us a little bit irritated. So we talked about folkways as the least severe type of norm violation. Then we talked about mores as the second most severe. The most severe type of norm violation is called a taboo. Taboos are something where it's just not okay. I mean, we said, like we were talking about with my son, Spencer here before, you could think of a case where folkways are, okay. You shouldn't do it, but everybody does it. Mores are a lot more serious. It's not, it's not something that's okay. More. You gotta, if you did do it, you've really gotta, atone for it in some way. You've gotta, it's gotta have to be addressed. People are not gonna be okay with that. Taboos are the most severe. People don't even like to talk about them. And the two that are the most classic examples that are always given, the two most classic examples of taboo are cannibalism and incest. Now, because this is a video that I'm posting online, and anything that gets said online or any video that gets posted online could get reproduced and taken out of context forever. I'm not going to discuss the incest one. We'll talk about it in class if somebody's wondering about that. But that as a taboo is a great example because really the idea of it, considering it, let alone discussing it, makes people uncomfortable. That's a taboo. That's what it is. The very idea of it is revolting. Same thing with cannibalism. It's not proper dinner conversation. It's not something you want to bring up in a job interview, It's just not something that people are okay with. They're not okay with the fact that it exists, and they're certainly not okay with the fact that, that you might have known somebody that has done it. Now, with that being said, there are, a few examples, extreme, and I mean that literally, extreme examples of when cannibalism or, well, I'm not even going to say the other one, extreme examples of when it was understandable. But like, for example, when the Uruguayan plane crash in the early 70s, they made it into a book by a guy named Pierce Paul Reed called Alive, which is a great book. I've got it in my library here at home. But it's a fantastic book, and he deals with the social and the psychological and the emotional implications of the decision that these kids, and they were all teenagers, teenage boys for the most part, who were in this plane wreck, and they had to make that decision to eat the flesh of their friends and their brothers, and I don't know if there were any brothers. Yeah, there were brothers and cousins and second cousins that had all been killed in this wreck. They had to make that decision to eat their flesh to stay alive. And the book does a great job of explaining how the taboo of how they would feel when they would take the meat off of the body of their friend that they'd been playing rugby with for years. It was a rugby team that crashed. They would take the meat off of them and they would put it on their tongue and try to chew it and swallow it. And the very act of that, he said, he described how the young men who were there, they described it as just feeling so foreign and so wrong, and just on almost a biological and almost a cellular level, that it wasn't okay. That's a taboo. And so that's the most severe form of norm violation. But even in that situation, you can think of, extreme, extraordinary situations when, it might occur, but it's still a taboo nonetheless, and you're not going to be able to get away from that. So now, when we're talking about culture, we defined culture in class as culture is the lens through which we see reality. So the culture that you're brought up in is the way that, for the most part, you paradigmatically approach the world around you. It's the lens, they describe it as the lens through which you see reality. So for example, a good buddy of mine who I served with, he's in Afghanistan, now he's a Native American. And in his tribe, they have 7 different genders. You know, in the States we really have 2 genders, masculine, feminine, that are socially acceptable. In his Native American tribe, they have 7. And he describes, you know, he's described to me, you know, all the different variations of not just the idea of gay, bi, straight, man, woman, just all the different, almost spectrum, all the different spectrum that somebody could be in terms of what their gender identity was. And so for him, when he met somebody new, or we're out serving and we're in the middle of, you know, nowhere up in some mountains in some third world country or whatever, and people are shooting at you and you're shooting back and everything's blowing up and everybody's dying, you know, and we're looking at these people who are on the other side of the hill that are shooting at us, and, you know, I put them right in this one discrete category. Bad guys who are trying to kill us that, you know, we have to get away from so we can go home or whatever. And he sees so many other layers of that, and the fact that gender does come into that. He's described how it does come into that, and he, you know, and he wonders about, you know, for these men that are over there, Taliban guys or whatever, that are over there, if part of the anger, part of their frustration comes from their inability to connect who they are individually in terms of their gender identity to this larger patriarchal Islamic Taliban society. I mean, and I was just listening to him say this, and I was, you know, there's a nice guy at a PhD in American Indian Studies, and, you know, smart guy. I'm sitting there listening to him, and I'm like, you know, I don't know, his name's Mitch. I'm like, Mitch, you know, I don't care. I don't care about this, you know. This doesn't make any difference to me. These guys are shooting, and, I mean, that's really all I gotta know, you know. I want to go home, and they're between where we are now and me going home. You know, the fact that they're having an interpersonal struggle about their gender, I don't know, it doesn't make much difference to me. And he said, well, that's because to you, it's just a taken for granted thing. And he said that, and I felt pretty stupid because as a sociologist, yeah, I should have recognized that as well. And so, but the fact is I didn't see it in the way he did. And so I don't know if it makes any difference in the way that we interacted with these people that we were there to try to help and to try to work with. I think it did. I think that he was a lot better at that element of it than was I. But the idea that the world is a particular way is almost entirely defined by your culture. So culture is the lens through which we see reality. Now, a couple of quick terms. Culture shock. The 2 terms we're going to use are culture shock and ethnocentrism. Culture shock is where you come in contact with, you're born and raised in your culture. I think I actually mentioned this one in class. You're born and raised and live in your culture, and you encounter something in a different culture that is so foreign to you that your basic idea of how you talk to somebody, how you interact with them, what you should or shouldn't do. The whole thing is called into question because a very basic element of your behavior was not met by the other person. This guy I used to know here in Salt Lake, he's a manager at a Sizzler restaurant here, and he's from Iran. And he told me about when his dad came over to visit him. His dad, you know, a much older Persian guy, first time he'd been outside of Iran. And he said he picked him up at the airport here, Salt Lake Airport. And my friend who worked at the Sizzler, he's LDS after he got here. He's Mormon. He grew up as a Shiite Muslim. And his dad, who came over, he was still Shiite Muslim. And so he said that the guy, he said his dad gets off the plane, and never having left Iran, and lands in Salt Lake City, Utah, and is just baffled. And he said that there's, so my friend Mohsen, Mohsen's like, so he said, so there's these 2 young guys. He goes, you know, just getting ready to go out on their mission. And he said, and they were really excited. And, you know, Mosen, my buddy, he's like, hey, you know, elders, you know, be safe out there and everything. And so they came up, you know, to shake hands with him. And so Mosen's dad, Mosen's like, I don't know, mid-40s or something. So Mosen's dad's like 700 years old or whatever. You know, he's never met Americans. He's never met LDS people. He's never seen any of this sort of stuff, right? And so these kids, these two young guys came, you know, to go shake his hand, and Mosen's dad does what older Persian guys do to other Persian guys, but to other guys, and that's you give him a kiss. And so this guy, you know, this kid's 19, he's about to go on his mission, and this old, you know, 100-year-old Persian guy, you know, goes up and gives him a kiss, and Mosen said he was upset because, you know, the kid jumped back and threw his hands back like that, and, you know, showing the palm of your left hand in a lot of Middle Eastern countries, but where they're from, actually in Persia, it's a lot more common in Arabic countries, but in Persian countries is it's the hand you use for wiping yourself after you go to the bathroom. So this kid jumped back and went like that, and so Mosen said his dad was so upset and so shocked and didn't know what happened. Not only did as he saw it, not only did the kid not kiss him, he pushed him away and jumped back and, you know, essentially showed his private parts to him, and the guy was just mortified. And, you know, so this guy had been off the plane for like 5 minutes. And so that's culture shock, where, you know, his dad's got to be wondering, this old guy's got to be wondering, okay, you know, what happens next? You know, what is wrong with this place? What do you do next? That's culture shock. The other one, ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is kind of what the young missionary kid was doing. Ethnocentrism, I mean, it's not really, because I wasn't there and I didn't talk to him and I don't know the situation, but ethnocentrism is where your understanding of the world, the way it works socially or culturally, the way that you see it, the way it works, is just the way it should always be. And so for this young kid going out on his mission, I mean, again, I don't know, but if I was just going to play devil's advocate here, the idea that, you know, that he was offended or mortified by, you know, an old Iranian Persian, you know, kissing him as a sign of respect and saying hello, the idea is that that's not okay. Like, don't do that. That's just wrong. Gross. I don't, you know, no. I understand that's your culture, whatever, but no, gross. Leave me out of it. Okay, that's ethnocentrism. Ethno is Greek. It means like people or us. And centrism, centric, of course, meaning, well, I don't want to define a word with a word, but central is a point by which, you know, all the other points are an equal distance around it. It's like a circle. So ethnocentrism is where you have your culture, your point of view as the middle, and everything else that happens in the world you see is as related to your culture, which is not how it is. Things that happen for people that grow up in other cultures or other parts of the world, what they do and the way they see the world is utterly unrelated to you. And so same thing for this kid who's getting ready to go on this mission in this case. You're not ever going to understand it. You're not ever going to be able to make any sort of social headway into a situation without understanding that the very idea of what you think is okay for two people who meet each other to do, the very nature of that, if you're not willing to question that, then that's probably ethnocentric. Yeah, I mean, in this kid's defense, he is 19, just going out on a mission, probably hasn't been outside of the States much, and wasn't expecting this. So all those things being said, I don't know if he's ethnocentric or not, probably not. But that's what ethnocentric is, where if somebody does it differently, then they're doing it wrong. It's not okay. So those are two terms when we're talking about culture that are pretty important: culture shock and ethnocentrism. And that's it for culture for this discussion. Watch the National Geographic video that I posted here, and email me if you got any questions. And, oh, sorry, a little bit of back pain there. Talk to you soon.